Okay, let's see if we are up and running. I don't know what was going on there. Hopefully, the stream is running. For some reason, it stopped unexpectedly. Took some time to actually get started. Was rolling a commercial right from the beginning, like a 6 minute commercial. So I apologize for that. Uh, Looks like the stream ended. Let me just put in here. We restarted. So let's see if restarting worked. If not, this might be all right. Are we up? Let's see. Is it up? Weird way to put it, but that's how I'm putting it. So I guess we are up. I am live now. All right. What a snafu! I will have to talk to some people and see if they can tell me. This is the first time that I tried using Restream to do not a live impromptu, but actually to schedule one ahead of time so that you got some notice that it was coming. And for some reason, I think it got confused. It looked like it was running twice, and that's what. No, we're just voices in your imagination. All right, I can't actually hear you, but it started right when you were in mid speech. All right, so this is the OSR tabletop live stream with DM Bluddworth. Although, as you can see by the graphic down here, it says DM Bluddworth, which is actually fine. I mean, that actually would create a good that would actually create a good NPC name. So let me see what I'm supposed to be showing. You can see messages in this channel. No, I'll have to, Tim. I'll have to check that out later and see. Anyway, so what I was planning for this particular stream is that I wanted to kind of ask the question: how do we create a genuine scariness in our RPG gaming? Whether and it doesn't necessarily have to be um, an RPG genre that you would normally associate with scariness. It's just how do you instill that kind of a scariness or an edginess or just to get the players to be um, cautious and nervous about the situations that they might be entering into. And one thing that I was thinking that you must have is that you must have some kind of a negative consequence in the game that will affect the player characters. Usually there's a death mechanic. So the loss of a player character is what the players will fear. Yeah, so losing a hit point and it's usually measured in hit points, or it might be measured in other ways. And that's what I really wanted to get into is that the only thing that's needed is, I mean, I think it's pretty clear that if you don't have some kind of a death mechanic, then you're not going to have any kind of sense of fear or trepidation on the part of the players. They're just going to boldly go wherever story takes them, or wherever they want to take the story, and they will have absolutely no fear of doing or attempting anything that they're trying to do. So a death mechanic is almost required in order to set up that kind of a circumstance. But there's other things short of either death or possibly even worse than death. So I have found during all of my years of role playing that one thing players really don't like to happen to their characters is that players don't like to lose control of their characters. Now, in some cases, like in Call of Cthulhu, this would be like the insanity mechanic, but it could be as simple as a morale system, where what you find in quite a number of various game systems, both in D&D, in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and in many of the retro clones and clones or just OSR games that are out there, is that there's a morale check that has to be made to see how that would impact the characters, and in some cases that could be as severe as them being in such fear that they turn and run. And in those cases, the player is losing control of his or her character. And so that's something that uh, they would not enjoy, or that would be something that they'd want to avoid. Leading up to this, I know one of the comments that I read on Facebook prior to this live stream was someone had mentioned ghosts. So ghosts in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, let's say, it's not just the fact, oh, there's a ghost, it's a spooky story. Um, Ghosts in AD&D will actually age your character, and it's not something that can be healed or easily reversed, because the nature of it is that it's a natural aging that takes place. And so it's very, very difficult to you know overturn that. And so if a player character is aged beyond his or her life expectancy, they die, and there's no bringing them back. You can't resurrect them. So there's that there are certain things that are short of death that players actually fear as well. Um, Level drain is another one, that another mechanic that was found typically in old school Dungeons and Dragons, especially Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where you have things like vampires and wights. When they hit you, you could lose up to two levels. And again, that's another thing that's not easily recoverable, other than just having to redo all of those experience points and get back. And in many cases, what DMs would do is that if your character died as per the loss of those levels and the loss of those hit points, then they would almost definitely rise as whatever undead had drained those levels. So they'd either come back as a vampire or come back as a wight, or whatever had brought them to that state as well. So there's a number of ways mechanically that you can create that scariness or that fear within the players, because they do oftentimes invest so much in their characters that just the idea of them dying is enough to make them a little bit nervous about going on a supposedly a difficult adventure. And and then there's the you know then you can build up the atmosphere around it as well. So now the players have the imagery of what's going on, and they know the mechanic is kind of lying there waiting to potentially affect them. And so when that all comes together, you kind of get a mix of the two. They have the immersion of the atmosphere and the description of what's going on, with the possibility um, of why the game mechanics are dangerous towards their characters. So let's see. There's also some undead and dragon auras. I'm just reading some of the comments here. Um, let's see, is a robot. I swear Indigo Dragon is a robot. You, sir, literally every single live stream on Earth. let's let's see if we can show that one there. Yes, Indigo does go to a lot of streams, and he's always a great commenter as well. So it's good to see these people here. So let me take a look at some of the comments here, and we'll go in. You probably hear a lot of chimes and bells and everything like that. It is 7:20 p.m. here, Eastern time, and so the kids are kind of out in force, celebrating Halloween. So that kind of ties into our Halloween stream here as well. So let's see. Let's do a one word Tarask. Guaranteed to scare. No, the Tarask is guaranteed to inflict a total party wipe on the countryside. Um, I recall my DM using that creature once, and we did everything we could to avoid it, and basically it literally wiped out several villages, and we were like, nah, we're not engaging that. We kind of ran away. So and then it burrowed back into the earth, and would rise again someplace else, at some other unpredictable time. I don't know why my DM used it. He never told us the kind of behind the scenes things that he would do in his campaign, and so that was something that did come up during one of our latter part of our campaign. That was like an 8 to 9 year long campaign that we're playing. So yeah, so if I hear of a terrace coming about, I am taking a prolonged vacation. Yeah, that's exactly what we did. We were like, nope, we're not engaging in that. We're not fighting that. I mean, our group. First of all, let me give you some context. My gaming experience as a player with our DM, Adam, who was our second DM. Um, we were a group of between 5 and 6 players that played from 1977 through about 80, 87, 88. Some of us kind of hung on until about 89. And both of our DMs during the time, and I was a part-time DM for some other systems, not for Dungeons and Dragons. Both of our DMs had this, made it very, very difficult to gain access to high-level healing spells, or reversing curses, or and certainly resurrection. And our second DM, Adam, he had virtually no resurrection in the world. So the one time we, our player Steve had begged to have access to a resurrection spell to bring back his main character. So this was a character that he played for a number of years, and he just wanted some way of getting that character back. And so the our DM Adam told us about a scroll that had a resurrection spell on it, and it was almost like an artifact type level scroll, and we would have to go into this tomb in order to get it, and it turned out to be the Tomb of Horrors. And our first group, which was not our primary group, thankfully, we went in with our secondary group, which our DM strongly suggested that we do. And the group, it was a total party wipe. And then the second time we did go with our main characters at this time, and and initially only 3 of us survived. We just said nope, the heck with that, and we departed very quickly, and we never went back in again. So the Tomb of Horrors is one of the only adventures that we attempted twice and never succeeded. And that kind of brings me to another thing that can be scary for the players. and that is just the sense of that in your missions, in your quests, you can fail, and then there would be consequences for that failure as well. And sometimes when those consequences are felt by others that they have developed a caring for, so let's say a small village that they had visited several times, and they got connected with the npcs that were in that small village, and then they go off on to an adventure and they fail a portion of the adventure, and then the consequences of that comes back several weeks later and revisits that small community that they were attached to, and then they return and they find out that, oh, you know what, some mistake that we had made resulted in all of these people getting wiped out. And so there's a real fear amongst players that, wait a second, we can actually fail a quest and there will be consequences for that, and consequences that we might now feel like we're responsible for, and now we're compelled to potentially try to make amends for it, fix it, or we might even be run off. We might be told, you're not welcome here anymore, and get out of this area. You're the storm crow, as they said in Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf was told he was no longer welcome because he always brought bad tidings with him, and bad things tended to follow him. So the players would be really, especially if they're long time players and their characters, and they've developed a long history within a particular region. They would certainly be afraid of having their reputation tarnished in such a way that they're actually asked to leave or possibly even hunted down. Uh, yes, you know what? I really appreciate that. I'm glad to have people come into the hobby, and to feel that the content that I'm putting out there actually brought you in is really something that's a big deal for me, and really appreciate the comment. And listen, if you're interested in jumping in on a game, just put that out there on a video or whatever. I'm looking to expand to include a few more one shots and such, and I'd love to have you play in one of my games, even if you were going to just come in for a few sessions, or once I have room in my campaign, and several of my players might over the long term drop out, I'll always be looking to fill in some of those slots. So yeah, so just keep on following along, and hopefully I get something running where I can get you in on it. So let's see, what else do we have here? Dragons are usually nerfed by modern day DMs. Let's see. So they don't kill any PCs. Yeah, Indigo, it's something that I just don't understand. Like, how can you? I I mean, unless you're playing like My Little Pony, or you're playing Toon, or something where character death is not supposed to happen. It's not part of the genre of it. How do you create tension? Just doesn't make sense to me. It's not story time. It's You're playing a game. The game has to have winning conditions and losing conditions, in order for it to have any kind of a sense of tension, create a sense of fear possibly, and just an interest. I mean, how could you be interested in playing a tabletop role playing game and there's no negative consequences for your actions? Or your inaction, so which is usually something that I prefer to create a negative consequence to inaction more so than an attempt that fails, rather than someone just ignoring something and I let that run wild when that happens. So let's see. Let's see what. So the last time I threw a dragon at a party, the wizard cast a spell at the dragon, ticked it off, and the dragon used a breath weapon to completely annihilate the wizard. The player quit on the spot. You see that? I mean, when when a player character dies, number one, the players at the table should know that that's a possibility. They should have a backup ready to roll. And if you had a long time character die in your campaign, as a DM, this is what I would do in that case. So I would try to get the player involved in some way in continuing that current session. I know there's a video out there where someone says you should stop the session. Um, no, I mean the party there has to. They might stop the particular scenario that they're going through to tend to and try to save or revive their fallen companion. Perhaps even abandon what they were doing at the time to bring their body back out and bring it to the nearest town to address it. But that's where the player whose character has just fallen can be brought in as an NPC in the time being, and then they can uh, they can bring up their backup character, and their backup character. I know there's the trope out there. Oh well, my character's cousin or brother or some relative will rejoin, and now part of his or her story becomes to seek revenge on the previous character, and so the identity of the new character is kind of lost in trying to get revenge. I'd rather have the player bring in a whole new character, but a character who will learn of or hear about the previous character in some positive way. And so um, and so that kind of keeps the memory of the other character alive. But moving forward, you have to have some kind of a negative consequence for failure in the game. um, that's usually character death. It could be other things like I mentioned previously, where you could have insanity, and you can have physical injuries or mental injuries that are permanent, that will take the character out of the adventuring business, and so they can no longer. I mean, this is how most of your NPCs that are former adventurers, ended up, retiring, is that they usually had some kind of an injury inflicted upon them where they can no longer adventure, and so now they're somewhat diminished, but still bigger and better, bigger and stronger, and whatever over a normal common human character, or any other NPC for that matter. But still, they were at one time an adventurer that lost their abilities to do so. Um, I've DM'd and I've had characters that were either paladins or cavaliers who lost their professions. They lost their character class and reverted to fighters, and that's something that players can feel a scare, a worry about, is that, well, I'm playing a character class that has very specific requirements of behavior, and if I fall off that path too much, I can actually lose my character class and become something that I really didn't intend to play. Again, it's an important mechanic because it is a mechanic that will kind of keep the players, within the realm of how they're supposed to play that particular character class. So it is again, it's a game. Games have mechanics that lead to either wins or losses, And if you're not presenting the players with the chance of winning and losing, then you're not playing a game anymore. You're literally just sitting around and telling stories, and whatever story you feel like. And to me, that's not, that's not fun. That's if I want to sit around and just make up and tell stories, I'll do that. I don't need any of the game books or rolling dice or anything like that in order to do that. Let's see what else we have here. So I allow. Let's see what Timothy has to say. I allow henchmen to be promoted to PCs. Yeah, and that's something that you can certainly do. I mean, obviously, there's game systems like Dungeon Crawl Classics that have, the zero level funnel that everybody runs their characters through, and you could potentially have more than one of those actually survive, and so you might have several backup characters ready to roll in case your primary dies. Um, so let's see. Playing Shadowrun teaches you to never make a deal with a dragon. Yeah, so and I've only played Shadowrun on computer games, so I'm not even though I have like the starter set, I've never actually played Shadowrun as a tabletop RPG. So that's something that you could probably teach me a lot about. But I have played it on. I haven't played it on the computer, and actually enjoy it. I really like the grittiness of it. So yeah, that's a very atmospheric kind of a game setting and genre that that's very easy to create that kind of tension and fear, because it's certainly the chances of you dying in that. So let's see. We go. How do you feel about the Ninja mechanic in Mifrog that encourages good deeds and punishes bad deeds? Yes, and in Mifrog, when your character dies, if they lived up to that those good deeds, and they lived up to the honorable way of doing it, your next character is rolled up, and number one, they'll get an attribute bonus to the highest attribute of your previous character that died, and they won't start with the full amount of character traits that the previous started with, but they will get a bonus based on what the previous character had done. But that's a system that's modeled more on the concept of reincarnation, as opposed to you just rolling up a different character. But yes, I enjoy that. I enjoy that mechanic. I kind of like the way that it does have that passing on to the next character. Um, and I also like the fact that, like, that's a pretty brutal game. I mean, that game, your character will die in that game if they do anything stupid. That's for certain. And you'd be surprised at what could wipe out your party. I recall one of the first times I ran the game. We had a party of five player characters, and they encountered a group of a small pack of wolves, and these were just generic wolves. They were regular wolves, and just several critical fails rolled in a row, and the way that the morale system works in that, and just the way that things kind of have a snowball effect, either positive or negative. But a snowball, or I should say, positive is a momentum, and a snowball is a negative. But uh, they lost three-player characters. I mean, three-player characters died before the final two, who were both wounded pretty severely, managed to kill off the last of the wolves. And common wolves like that could never kill even the first level party in Dungeons and Dragons. So two totally different systems, and certainly an interesting an interesting system if you want to test the waters on playing ordinary characters in extraordinary circumstances, which is the way I like to describe that. So let's see, we get a comment about DCC. I just started my venture into DCC. So far, I'm loving every minute of it. Yes, DCC is an interesting. I've played it probably like 3 or 4 times. Um, 3 times with the funnel, 1 time without. And I do like the funnel, as brutal as it can be. And the 1 time that I played it without the funnel, and I believe we were playing at second or third level characters, and it was still a dangerous system. So yeah, a lot of fun. Um, we were playing straight up fantasy, so that there wasn't any kind of like real spookiness to it or whatever. But let's see if what are some of the spookiest games or adventures that you have either played in or run. So that's a question out to the those that are following. The Weird Frontiers rule book is a paltry 908 pages long. It's So it's like Fatal, right? Fatal is about 900 pages long as well, with a whole lot of nonsense in it. But from what I understand, that system has a structure to it that actually makes sense and is actually quite good. But then there's probably about 300 or 400 pages of just unnecessary, mess. But anyway, I'm not familiar with Weird Frontiers, so that might be something I'll have to take a look at. So Dave, the GM, let's see what Dave has to say. So I'm very lucky with my roles when I DM, so I just scare my players in general. As far as a spooky goes, my favorite horror game, spooky is 10 Candles. Spooky is 10 Candles. Horror game for spooky. All right, so 10 Candles is a game. Um, and again, I'm not familiar with that as well. That's one of the great things about OSR and indie games is that there's so many of them out there that you're just like you constantly hear about new ones that are out there, and oftentimes they do have at least one unique quality to them that really that really makes it a must have, so that you can then pull from this and pull from there, and kind of piece together some of your home brews or your just different things that you get to use in a one shot, let's say, just testing things out. So yeah, but there's quite a lot. I mean, I mentioned Tomb of Horrors is a scary adventure, not due to its spookiness, but you kind of expect to die in it, and so you really don't want to bring your primary characters into that. Um, let's see, it's more of a rules light storytelling. All right, love it for scary stuff. Yeah, I'll definitely take a look at it. I'll definitely see if I can get a hold of it. So Naratu, or yeah, Naratu D20 is all right. Is it scary though? Is it or is it kind of like a? Again, I'm not I'm somewhat familiar with it. To me, it seems more like it's more like a Dragon Ball Z kind of thing. I might be completely off the mark on that. I know my students were really into it, more so than Dragon Ball Z, but I never actually got into reading the anime on it and seeing what it's about. But yeah, I mean, that's such a niche that's going to go to that very young crowd. And the fact that its rule book is 100 and I mean 1,015 pages long. um kids are reading that, and that's an amazing thing because adults are less likely to read that. I know just from my students, my eighth graders, that they would probably eat that thing up and read every single page of it and memorize it, to the point that they'd be able to recite sections of it. So yeah, so that's impressive how big that is. Um, I guess us as we get older, we don't have that kind of focus and attention on things. So here we go. Mayfair Games, The Keep, in the mid '80s, partially based on the novel, and the movie was only a horror module I ever DM'd. Okay, and that's from Timothy. Um, Howdy, Legion of Myth. So Legion of Myth. What is the right now we're dealing with the question of what was at least one adventure or one scenario that you've run that was like the spookiest for you. Um, so we'll let you think about that and then come back. We were TPK'd in Ravenloft. Yeah, Ravenloft was a combination of the two. I think the best combination of the two. And this is of course the original Ravenloft. So Ravenloft, you had the potential for dying. You had the potential for um, losing levels. All right, from level drain. You had the potential of being aged, beyond your characters, of beyond their life expectancy, and so expiring and no way to bring them back because they died of old age. You're then on top of that, you had all of the atmosphere that came with old school Dracula. And when I say old school Dracula, I'm talking about from the original inception of the character, and you just had that total atmosphere, and that comes from, I mean, obviously that comes from the writing of the authors, Tracy Hickman and Margaret Weiss, really bringing um, that atmosphere together for that adventure. I don't know. I know in later editions it became a campaign setting, and to be honest with you, I don't quite understand how that could become a campaign setting. Um, but I guess a lot of people just really enjoy it. So you have that as well. Let's see. I just got some kind of an alert. So let's see. I like Nightbane. So I like Nightbane from Palladium as well. It does horror supers in a very neat way. Yeah, Palladium. I got to dig more into Palladium now that I got my Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I want to start digging through that and get a better sense of how Palladium, really their systems differ from others that I played much more. I still have to dig into Rifts as well, and see how that works. I was much more familiar with GURPS as far as those multi-genre game systems. And so GURPS, you're able to kind of pull off whatever genre you really want, but I don't think it carries the same. It doesn't carry the same, like, let's say, spookiness or riskiness that AD&D could produce. In that sense, that's kind of like where I kind of lean on is that AD&D I thought was a better system for creating tension than I found GURPS was. Maybe Palladium does it at the same level. I mean, and none of them compared to Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu, I think, was the perfect combination of genuine fear of the players that they were going to lose control of their character. Their character was going to come out of it insane, regardless of what they did, or the character was going to die. The character was going to do everything but be truly successful. It wasn't designed where you could win in Call of Cthulhu. I recently said this in another stream. I was like, there was no winning in Call of Cthulhu. There was just surviving. And if you manage to survive with your mental capacity intact, and you survive physically, um, you were still not going adventuring again. So there was never, it was still an end of your career, because you lock yourself away, from the rest of society, and just try to deal with, the mental shock that you went through in realizing, those kinds of things. So the Call of Cthulhu, I think, is probably the best combination of all of those different elements, at least in my experience. It certainly was, but and then I would go. My next step would be, probably looking at Ravenloft is another one that kind of combined some of those different elements. So you had atmosphere, you had the risk of your character's life, you had the risk of your character's levels, you had, these various different things. You had severe consequences if you didn't, accomplish what you were looking to accomplish as well. So it had that as well. Um, that you didn't necessarily have. Well, let's say Tomb of Horrors. If you didn't succeed in Tomb of Horrors, there was no chance the tomb was still there. It wasn't going to expand or do anything to the countryside. It didn't have that kind of a risk involved with it. Um, but Ravenloft potentially did, because there was predation, spreading beyond there. So let's see. All right, so I have Beyond the Supernatural coming in soon as well. Palladium does horror well. Yeah, and I know I missed this one here. So CBK Ply. Uh, I just I just put Beyond the Supernatural in a package. Okay. Um, let's see what else we have here. So Ravenloft 2 was an add-on. Yeah, let's see about Ravenloft 2. Was an add-on to Ravenloft 1. I think it was run concurrently. Yeah, Ravenloft 2 was like a return to, correct? If I'm correct me if I'm not wrong. Ravenloft 2 was second edition, and I was already no longer playing Dungeons and Dragons by the time that second edition came out. The last RPG, tabletop RPG that I played just before um, just before stopping and going into the military was actually Twilight 2000. That was the very last tabletop game that I played. Then I went into the military, and we didn't play back then. I mean, at least the group, like, I didn't encounter any groups that played back then. We played craps, and we played cards, and things like that. None of us, in my unit, we didn't have anyone that was playing tabletop role playing games. So I just didn't experience that. And I was with my unit for well, the first one I was there for 2 years, and then the second one I was there for the remaining of my six. So I did like 8.5 years. So during that 8.5 year time, there wasn't any. We weren't doing tabletop role playing. We were playing. PlayStation. PlayStation One. I don't even think PlayStation Two. PlayStation Two might have been out in the early '90s by that point as well, and it was mostly sports games. That's what we were really into. So I know I just saw Legion of Myth. Uh, I did more playing in the military. Uh, well, the Air Force. So almost, yeah, exactly. Uh, we always do that cross branch teasing. So the Air Force, my experience with the Air Force was twofold. So we used to go to McGuire Air Force Base for breakfast at one of their and McGuire Air Force Base was the one half of the post, and then the other half was Fort Dix, and so which was the Army post. And we used to eat there all the time because they had the best mess halls, better than most diners and restaurants that you could actually eat in. So they had, the Air Force always had the best of food, and they got combat pay if they didn't have a refrigerator in their carpeted barracks. So that was always a joke, but also a reality is that they had more free time, I think, than certainly we did in the Army. So yeah, and then here we go. I had to go to Fort Dix for my combat training. Got yelled at for not busting my own tray. Well, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. If you didn't, that would be insane not to bust your own your own tray. There was no such thing. Man, we would have gotten brutalized if you just left your mess there. We couldn't even talk at mealtime. If you spoke at mealtime, especially in basic training, a drill sergeant will walk over. Oh, you had time to talk. You're done. So we got used to eating. In 3-4 minutes, just to take one bite of everything before usually got kicked off the table and out of the mess hall. So that's another spooky thing. So we can go into that and talk about that. There's various spooky military things. Actually, let me grab let's see if I can find it real quick. So never going home. All right. So this is actually an adventure module. So it's kind of set. It's like a World War I themed um, RPG where the it's not just like chemical weapons and stuff like that, but there's like magic and curses that alter everything going on, and so it's another nice spooky kind of take on a World War I or any kind of a war based RPG. This is put out by Wet Ink Games, so really really nice stuff. Great graphics and very simple system to utilize as well, and just a lot of content. So much content packed into these. Highly recommended if you're looking to kind of combine up those two things. So if you want like a kind of a creepy, scary military kind of RPG theme going on, that's certainly something I would look into. All right, so let's see. My copy of AD&D Second Edition was from the Army Public Library, as my uncle called it. Okay. The U.S. Army Public Library, as my uncle called it. What would that be? I don't remember them having that many. Like, you're not talking about a PX, but yeah, the U.S. Army Public Library. I don't know what that would refer to. Yeah, because they didn't have games and stuff like that in the PXs that I'm aware of. Let's see, what else do we have? Going into lurking mode. All right, Ravenloft. So we're still got some more on Ravenloft here. All right, Indigo had to depart, I guess. Well, thanks for stopping in, Indigo. All right. Well, let's see. So what's some other things? So I've already mentioned. Morale checks help to create some tension. Um, you have various mind control type spells and things like that where the player loses control over their character, and that's something that I think a lot of players are always nervous about. um, yeah, I like this comment here. So low level deaths are pretty easy to write off as well, that's the way it goes, but how do you handle high level character deaths? This is how I would handle a high level character death. I would have the player create a new character, obviously, that will be brought in Um, if not the same level, very close to the same level as the last, because they do have to continue with the rest of the party and move forward. I wouldn't have them necessarily come in as a relative of, or even an acquaintance of the previous character. I try to encourage the player to create a character that's completely new, but I wouldn't let the memory of the character that just died just disappear. um it's they'll be down the ways, especially if it's a high level character. When they go into a tavern a couple weeks later, and maybe even a couple weeks in real life, as well later, and you're in like 10 or 12 sessions beyond that character's death. um, the player character group now could be sitting in a tavern and they hear someone singing a song and it mentions that player character, in a storytelling ballad that is praising the sacrifice of that character. That is going to do a few things. Number one, it's going to take some of the sting out of the loss of that character. It's also going to bring a certain amount of life to the world, because now the players can see that their actions have consequences, including positive consequences, to the world, going forward and everything. And I think it would be pretty cool if you're sitting here and you're realizing, hey, my last character has now become part of the world's kind of lore and its storytelling, and it's he or she was that important, um, to this campaign setting, that we can hear about it now. So that's how I would handle high level character death. Is I would hope that my DM, would acknowledge that character later on, and I, as a DM, I'm certainly going to do that. So when we close out our campaign, which I believe, my current campaign, I'm intending on it lasting, at least 2 years, if not longer. When we do wrap it up, we are going to do like one of those retrospectives, so going back and looking at all of the characters that had been a part of this, had been a part of this long campaign, no matter how short they were, and how many sessions they actually lasted, or if they did last for a long time and then unfortunately died. So yeah, that's how I would handle character death that way, especially a high level character death. So I got to bounce. Sorry, DM Dave, thanks a lot for stopping in. um, yeah, you'll catch the rest on replay, which should go up fairly quickly. Let's see. Legion of Myth, all about cinematic death for high level characters. Let the player describe it. Yes, yeah. Let the player, like, so. I would send like a private message to the player, especially if we're playing obviously online. I would send them a private message and say, all right, how do you want to play this out? Your character's dead, but like, what do you want to kind of see what happens? And as I said really earlier on, um, you're not going to shut down the session. You don't end the session. You continue the session with the modification that the rest of the player characters are now going to try to do something about securing the body, getting it into a place where it'll be safe and hopefully unmolested. And you know, unless you unless you're in a total party of like complete murder hobos that aren't really going to care, everybody's chaotic neutral. Then they'll be like, all right, so one less person. I actually said this one time. Oh, it's one less character we have to worry about. We'll just move forward. That was my half elf thief. First female character I ever played. She was chaotic neutral, and and yeah, she didn't care about anything going on. She actually married another player character just so that when when she set up for his death, she could then have access to the magic items that he was carrying. And yeah, she was a pretty, you know, a, a pretty brutal character. So let's see, what else do we have there? So, but the character still dies. Yeah, yeah, character still dies. So you're going to talk to the character, talk to the player. I mean, you're going to talk to the player and ask them how to go about. Um, Never Go Home equals Twilight 2000. No, it doesn't. What Never Go Home is a World War One with a like a dark fantasy twist to it. So the the NPCs that you end up fighting become kind of like corrupted by like a magical, a magical corruption. There's a lot of I want to say almost like a, yeah, it's like a dark fantasy twist to World War One. That's the best way that I can describe it. And so it's definitely recommend you take a look at it and see it. I do have several videos on that, so you can always go back into the back catalog and check it out. And at some point, maybe during the summertime, I'll revisit some of these games as well that have been back a long time ago that I need to spend a little bit more time with as well. So let's see. Honestly, does World War One need a dark fantasy twist to it? You know what? Yeah, I think it does. To be honest with you, I think that it because we've seen it played out in other ways. Mostly like tabletop wargaming and things like that, and we've seen it on in computer gaming, although not as much as like World War II was. But yeah, putting a dark fantasy twist on it is really a really cool way of taking something that we may potentially know quite a bit about, and then putting a twist to it just to make it a little bit more interesting. I mean, you could take that with any kind of a topic that you might know a lot about, and put a twist to it. It just makes it much more, just much more interesting. I mean, you have things like cowboys in space, and all kinds of genres. I mean, you look at like Firefly is basically a space western. Some people argue that so is Star Wars. So anytime that you take some of these genres that have been very, let's say, one note for a long period of time, and then you put that twist to it, it's a way to just make something a lot more interesting. So I don't mind playing a dark fantasy version of World War II. That would be intriguing to play. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole point of dark fantasy is to take something that's normal, like or fairly, commonly thought of, and then giving it a dark, fantastic twist to it. Um, some of the scariest things that some people have created is taking nursery rhymes and putting a dark twist to them. Sometimes it's even a comedy trope, like the Vorpal rabbit in the Holy Grail. All right, Monty Python's The Holy Grail. I mean, you see this cute little bunny, and then it comes out. That's putting a dark twist to something that most people would normally look at in a very pleasing and pleasurable light, and now all of a sudden it takes that turn. Um, Something I've done in my game is in my own gaming is that introducing zombie children, or children that are zombified. I don't know exactly what you would call them. Toddler zombies are scary as hell. It's like they're it really puts that like creepiness to them that regular zombies don't have that same effect on the players that children do. So when you twist children like that and you just give that to them, because they're still going to feel compelled to destroy them. The paladin will still try to turn them, or the cleric, or the fighters will still try to, they'll be forced to kind of hack them down. But the players don't forget the fact that this was a 6-year-old child that's now trying to eat my brains. And so it becomes it becomes that kind of like a scarier, just a creepier thing to throw at them. Just remember to pull the pin and count to 3. um yeah, let's see. Ring Around the Rosie is spooky enough. Yes, Ring Around the Rosie. If you don't know, it's so Ring Around the Rosie is about the Black Plague. All right, and so that's what they used to stuff the petals of roses into the pockets of those that died from the Black Plague before they were then piled up into these huge funeral piles. And I don't know if the people actually surrounded around the ring, um, but I've only known bits and pieces of that whole story. But yeah, that was a lot of things. The pockets full of roses, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. Yeah, so they used to stuff the rose petals into the pockets of those, and then yeah, yes, I am a history teacher. It's well, it's more European history, so I'm not really that well versed in it. I just know little bits and pieces of it. But yes, um, Vasen is something I'm going to put this one up here. So Vasen is something I actually want to look into. All right, it's been a game that's around. The book looks gorgeous. All right. So the booklet's gorgeous, and I would certainly recommend it, like, because I'm really into Nordic themed games in general, whether it's RPGs or even on computer games and such. So I'm really into that kind of stuff. I mean, I do like Mifrog as well. So any of those things. And Vasen is kind of like a dark fantasy Nordic uh, kind of uh, kind of genre book, role playing game. So yes, I am definitely looking into getting that, especially since the book looks absolutely gorgeous. So I missed that Kickstarter when it first came out, or was at the time. I was like, you know, um, I just wasn't quite there to drop the money down on it. But it's certainly something I'm going to look into. Yeah, Ring Around the Rosie is not an urban legend. What where it derived some of its story to it from. I know. I'm fairly certain. Let me say that I am fairly certain that the rose petals in the pockets was something that was done, and I know it's about the Black Plague and burning the bodies. Yes, Hellboy. So Hellboy is a World War II dark fantasy twist to it as well. So especially the very beginning of it. Um, Hellfrost is another one that I've heard of. What are your thoughts on Hellfrost? Heard of it, GM Randolfo. I have heard of it. Um, I'm trying to think, like, how. I guess it's very similar to Vasen, right? Isn't it? Isn't it also a Nordic? And it is it Savage Worlds? So let's see. What are your thoughts on Hellfrost for the Savage Worlds? All right, so it's a heavy Viking. Yeah, so it's very similar to Vasen, I guess. Again, another one of those. There are so many OSR and independent games out there that as much collecting and buying that I do, it's just impossible to get it all. And that's the strength of the OSR, and that's the strength of the of the indie game scene. Is that I know some people will say, "Oh, there's too much out there. There's too much of a glut, and how many of these do you really need?" Then there's another one. You might find a game that works so perfectly for you and your group of players, and I've never heard of it 6 months after it's released, 2 years after it's released, 20 years after it's released. But I found other games that work perfectly well with my players. Um, you don't have that if you're just playing Dungeons and Dragons from OD&D to WotC's fantasy, fifth edition role playing game. Um, or if you only played Call of Cthulhu, from 1981 to the present day, uh, that's going to be your one, your go-to game. That's fine, but if you don't expand beyond that, that I think is a detriment to just not only your own experience, but but it's not great for the hobby. The hobby really does need for people to expand and to look into different things. So when people tell me about these new games like Vaesen, it's like I wasn't thinking about Vaesen all day long. Now once I'm done with this stream, I'm probably going to look it up and see, well, how can I get my hands on it and take a look at it, and and if it's not crazy, crazy priced or whatever, I will probably grab a hold of it. So there's so much out there. Did you know that Blade Runner is getting a TTRPG? I would be the guys by Free League can wait for it. The guys. Let me reread. Did you know that Blade Runner is getting a TTRPG adaptation by the guys at Free League? Can't wait for it. Yeah, I mean, Blade Runner. I guess you could put that into any of the any of the other. I'm drawing a blank. It's a cyberpunk game, and I'd rather much rather play one based on like Neuromancer and Burning Chrome and those that line of gameplay. I'd love to play a tabletop game based on the Forever War. Um, that would be insane to play the Forever War. Because that game there, just the idea of when you have combat in space, there's obviously no sound in space, and so people are and a laser bolt like just burns a hole through you, and it automatically fuses the wound, to the point that there's like virtually no blood. It's just like poop, and you have a hole in you, and that would be, talk about unnerving when your combat is completely in silence, and so you've lost that aspect of what's going on as far as the action. You really can't tell what's happening around you, in that extent. So it's that's pretty cool. Yes. um Yes, so Cyberpunk, again. Cyberpunk is a game that I've played more so on the computer than on tabletop, and so yeah, there's Cyberpunk, but there's very good game systems put out, specifically Cyberpunk, that by name and genre. So that's the great thing about it is that it's not just a name, it's a genre of a game system as well. And so but again, I've played it on the computer, and the most recent iteration of it as well, but never as a tabletop. So another game I'd like to take a look at. Yeah, so the Cyberpunk 2077 is the one on computer that I've played. And it was okay, but it wasn't like that's kind of like an open world kind of game where you get into it. You could follow the storyline if you want to, or you could just kind of do your own thing. And I got kind of bored with it after a very short time. I probably only put about 30 hours into it. And most of that was just screwing around. It wasn't really digging that deeply into it. And I mean, I have the same feeling with like playing like Skyrim or something like that. I just can't get into the computer gaming like I used to be able to. I'd rather, I'd rather delve more deeply into tabletop role playing games instead. Dr. Seuss is triggering to some. Where did that come from? I don't see what that is coming from. Dr. Seuss is triggering to some. I guess if you're immersed into a setting that's just so bizarre, especially if you're not from that setting. So one of the things that I just picked up actually, I just picked up the World of Gor, Gorian role playing world encyclopedia, and I've had the actual rule book for quite some time. So this is put out by Grim Jim Desborough, and I was waiting a really long time to get to this, and the I read the novels back when I was a teenager. I probably read the first like 10 novels and then I stopped. But the thing about this is that you have your the main character gets thrown into a world not of his own, and that could be something that's just very unnerving, because now you're in a completely different place than you're familiar with, and then trying to acclimate yourself to a new world, or trying to figure out how the heck to get back home again. So it's kind of like the Alice in Wonderland kind of issue. It's but in a darker fantasy or sci-fi fantasy setting that you have, where as Alice in Wonderland is just a weirdness, like Dr. Seuss would be a weirdness as well. And there's a lot of games that do that, where you have a human from Earth getting transported into a different time, a different place, and then trying to survive. And that in itself can be unnerving. Well, that's what I want. Gore, yes, yeah. I just picked it up, because it was coming up on Facebook where someone was complaining about, oh, it's misogynistic, it's this, it's that, it's all these things. Oh, it tells a lot about you if you're reading, if you're getting this kind of game and everything, and it's like the original books were written in like the 1960s. How freaking bad could they be? It's like it's just it's just an interesting setting, and you're not there, you're not actually experiencing any of that stuff, so they can go as far as they want, with it. Learn how to separate real life from fantasy and fiction. That's my advice. Yes, thanks a lot for dropping in, GM Randolfo. I have to practice saying that name a little bit because I've seen you around quite a bit, and I don't think we've ever interacted. But thanks for popping in. Good to see you, Mar Hawkman. Let's see. The tour books had very superficial sexism. Are you sure it's superficial? It's like I think it was a little bit beyond superficial, but it was meant to be that kind of a fantasy setting. It was meant, or sci-fi fantasy setting. It was meant to be a brutal world, and so yeah, it was. It was. It's just how it was meant to be. I mean, there was slavery, there was the sexism. It was a very, very brutal society um that had developed, and it's been ages since I read this stuff, and I was waiting to get this book here so I can actually dig into it again, and hopefully have Grim Jim come on and talk about um, writing for this particular intellectual property, which I think is kind of unique, that and incredible that he was able to do that, because that's something that's really cool about, again, about the OSR and about indie game scene, is that sometimes they get these obscure intellectual properties, and they get the license to actually create a game around them. You're not going to get the big companies. Hasbro's not going to back that kind of a niche game. They're going to look for something that's going to potentially be a cash cow for them, and a niche game isn't going to do it. So the only place that you're going to find those things is within the OSR and within the indie game scene. It's a long one. Let's see. Well, Gorian society wasn't fully patriarchal, no. Also, both genders could be slaves. That's correct. Sure, female slaves were more common, and there were more than one book that delves rather deeply into how common. But yeah, I mean, there were like 36 novels, and they were not all around the same theme. There was, and ultimately, um, it was never portrayed in a good light. It was never looked at, oh, this is a great thing that's going on here. It was always looked at as, oh no, this is a problem. Um, especially in the eyes of Tarl Cabot, the main character, that he was shocked by it, and whether, like I said, it's been 35 or more years since I've read it. Um, whether he fully acclimated, and like I said, I only read probably about the first 10 novels or so of it, so I don't quite recall um, where it had gone beyond that. But yeah, I mean, great series. Let's see, one more Gorian thing. Gorian society was shown to be, yeah, generally horrible. It was. I mean, it was portrayed as, this is not a good thing. It's like when you have horrible situations in games, to create a shock value or scariness, or a to make you like really like have like a revulsion towards something that's going on. It's always from the perspective of, this is a bad thing that you're now going to work to stop. So I've never seen the problem with having some of those themes in a game. um, there's not a problem with having horror in a game, or graphic horror in the game. I mean, it's, if it's meant to create in the player a desire to stop it, then I think it's a positive thing. If it's encouraging them to participate in it, I think there's very few that actually do that. um, I don't think that there's many DMs that run their campaigns like that. As much as people make the idea of an evil campaign, very few people actually do them, and they don't last very long. I have played in what might be called an evil campaign, and I've attempted to run some evil campaigns, and they are short. I mean, they don't last very long, because usually the consequences of the player's actions come back at them, and usually building up to the point where they either stop or they get wiped out. It just becomes a very short-lived campaign. Um, so let's see. So the Gore novels are basically porn. I don't know if I wouldn't say that. I mean, I don't recall them being all that graphic. Um, and like I said, I've read these things when I was, 13, 14, 15 years old. I don't remember them being that graphic. But I mean, Grim Jim put out put out a an RPG for it. So, and I will do more of an in-depth review of it and go through it and talk about now that I got the World book. Which, by the way, I ordered it from Amazon and it came to me in one day. I ordered it Saturday morning and it came today. I couldn't believe how quickly it was actually shipped to me. So, for certain things, deliveries are very, very fast. I can't quite explain why it came that fast. Yeah, Mark Huckman came in and said, I don't really think it went that deeply into sexy stuff. It was just R rated at worst. Yeah, it just it had slavery. It had it had blatant sexism, and although as Mark Huckman said, men could be slaves as well. It had a number of behaviors and systems and government systems and such that were atrocious. I mean, they were always portrayed as being a negative that needed to be that needed to be stopped. And so that's why I say there's not a problem with including anything in your system, anything that would be quote unquote evil in your system, as long as the players, unless you're playing an evil campaign, your players, you're going to encourage them to try to bring a stop to it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have things like the slave lords modules in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, I don't know anybody that ran those adventure modules that said, "Hey, you know what? You're going to join the slave lords and push to spread slavery throughout the Fala, the Falaneas." And I just don't, you know, I just don't see that being a problem of having some of those kind of very dark themes to a role-playing game. I mean, it certainly also is important to what age group you're playing with it. You're not going to play that with a group of 10, 12 year olds. Even though we were probably 10 or 12 when we were playing it, um that wouldn't be normally the case. You would say, you know what, I'm not going to run a rated R game, let's say, with a group of 13-year-olds. Not today. I think that would be irresponsible to do that. But adult and over, 17, 18-year-old and over, whatever you want to play. I mean, it's no problem with it. Even evil is hard to do and a bit boring. When it's more interesting, it's morally gray. Where evil guy. Huh? All right. That kind of trailed off, but yes, people oftentimes say, chaotic evil isn't always chaotic stupid. You shouldn't play evil as being stupid, and I mean, lawful evil is sometimes very hard to notice the evil part of it because it is done so systematically that and it's not always meant to be that detrimental, but as it turns out, it does become detrimental to certain aspects and everything like that. So yeah, when you're playing with evil characters, or you're as a DM creating an evil character, a villain, it's important for the villain to to be intelligent, and played intelligently. And it's important for the villain to, to have some kind. Villains almost always think that what they're doing is the right thing to do. Very rarely do they are they doing the wrong thing, intentionally doing the wrong thing, and that's what they're going for. Um, so let's see what Cal says here. We're going back to Gore. Gore, I remember seeing the books a long time ago. Yes. Um, I want to say they were written in the late 60s, and I first became aware of them probably in the early 80s. So I would have been early 80s. I would have been around 13 through 13 through 15 years old when I first read the books. So, but yeah, they are quite old. Yes, I mean, a lot of governments are lawful evil. Um, I mean, there's a certain aspect of what they're doing, especially when they're doing things that aren't really in the best interest of the people, but in the best interest of them uh, gaining and consolidating power. That's lawful evil. Um, Now, you could sit down and have breakfast with them, or you could sit down and have a beer with them, and they might be pleasurable people to sit down and chat with, but they're not. But in their actions, especially in the government realm, they're completely self-serving and just meant to amass power. All right, so let's see. Uh, Well, welcome, Paul. I just tuned in. If evil is defined as a disregard for life, then evil characters don't disregard all life. Evil characters love their kids, usually. Um, yeah, I mean, unless you're dealing with like a true chaotic evil that kills their own kids, then yes, there. Like I said slightly earlier, you might have just missed it. Like a lot of evil characters don't see themselves as wait, I'm the bad guy, that comes from Falling Down, the movie Falling Down. Wait, I'm the bad guy. They don't see themselves as the bad guy. um, I don't think politicians actually think that oh, what I'm doing is a bad thing. They think that, well, if I amass all of this power, I will be able to do so much more good for the people than the people could do for themselves. So it's it's part of an arrogance. It's part of a just like a delusion that they don't actually see their actions as being evil. Very, very few people see their actions as being evil, even though when they do things that everyone else, when they look at it, they're like, man, that's pretty darn evil. They don't see it that way. So let's see. Oop, I pressed the wrong button here. Um, oh boy. um, yes, and the reason why is because there were certain there were certain aspects of it that he was aware, maybe not later on when he was totally insane, but he had to be aware that everything that he was saying or doing was not the truthful thing, and so that's what makes it evil, is the fact that he was aware that what he was doing was wrong. um, at least potentially earlier on, and it was just an acquisition of power. But yeah, it's a dangerous example. It's because I mean I don't think that there was certainly an unhinged or an insanity involved in that, and I've read many things where It was always due to syphilis and this and that, and he just wasn't right in the head. Um, but we still have to say that it's evil. I don't see doing it any other way. Um, if you look at, like, if we're going to look at like Marvel comics, and we look at the end game. Is it evil for him to wipe out half of everybody in existence because the world is so screwed up that he felt that, if the world was halfway populated, then it would be a better place? Or Magneto is another character where, it was out of the, atrocities that he came up through, and the fact that he could see the trend towards other, that regular humans are looking at mutants and looking to subjugate them the same way, and so he responds. It's like there's, that's not, I don't think that's really considered to be evil, because it's not intended to be. Is he the bad guy in that case, where he's taking what might have been a justifiable position and moving forward with it beyond a certain point? Then that's where it becomes evil. But I think his heart was in the right place. I think it was just from the damage that was done to him, um, that altered his way. He couldn't see the difference. He was, like, wait a second, I'm not, I'm the bad guy here. He wouldn't have recognized himself as being the bad guy. He'd see himself as being justified. Um, so yeah, there's there's a lot of difficulties in deciphering those kinds of things. But that's why in a fantasy fiction, we tend to portray evil and scary things and such in such a an over the top way that there could be no question about it. Um, you know, Strahd was an evil guy. I mean, there was no question about it. There's the various creatures that you have in Dungeons and Dragons that are listed as evil. Orcs are an evil race. They were designed to be an evil race. I know I'm probably blowing up some people's heads there, but the point is that they were designed to be an evil race. They were designed to be a scourge on all that was all of humanity, including demi-humans, in that mix as well. And I call them a demonic race, because they were brought into being by a deity who occupied the abyss. I mean, so you could certainly say they were kind of like the mortal version of demonic beings placed on the earth to wipe out everything else around them. Um, so when they're portrayed in that kind of a very cut and dry manner, then there's no ambiguity to it. There's no, you just know that they're evil and they need to be wiped out. That's the game mechanic that was used for them. Was they were meant to be something that the player characters would work to destroy. All right, so let's try to get back to our scary and Halloween theme here. Um, in So if we look at some of these things, like and I was just thinking of Harry Potter and some of the spookiness that was in the Harry Potter books and the movies and such. And suspense is another way to create fear in your players. Dropping those little hints where they start to feel that there's like an impending doom, um, that could be the result of either their failure to succeed in their quest, or if they ignore certain parts of what they were supposed to have done, and so now that runs off on a thing. So yeah, there's different ways that you can use suspense in order to create a fear or so. I just watched The Void before coming here. All right, so I'm not familiar with the show. So again, it'll be something that I'll at least watch. I'm guessing it's a series. It's a number of episodes. I think it is a series. So if it is, just let me know what it's streaming on, and I'll take a look at it. It's probably on Netflix or something. Um, but yeah, I'll certainly give it a look at. Let's see, what else do we have? Thanos. We're talking about Thanos. Thanos was killing half of all life, then shifted to creating an entire new universe where he's God. Um, but was that his intention, Nugan? I don't know if that was his intention. Again, I think he was another one of those people that were broken, and then came up with an extreme measure to respond to that harm that was done to him. Uh, So it's a movie. All right, thank you. I'll give it a look at. I'm guessing, like I said, it'll be on something. I have Netflix. I have a few other kind of streaming things. So I'll try to catch it and take a look at it. So let's see. So Apocalypse is a hardcore killer, but he does. Let's see. So Apocalypse is a hardcore killer, but he does so for reasons that are red in tooth and claw. System of morality. Yeah, I mean it's again. There's part of RPGs and part of stories, fictional stories, where you have these where you have the concept of an evil that is kind of out of control. So kind of like your werewolf kind of evil thing where it loses control, lashes out, and then that's meant to create a certain scariness revolving around them, because not only can the player characters get infected by lycanthropy and become what they're trying to destroy, but the fact that they're being sent out to destroy something that may have at one time been uh, a good person, that was only put into that circumstance due to something out of their control, and now the players have to go out there and destroy it, and that kind of sense of either an evil that exists in the world that has to be destroyed is also a scary feature of whatever game system that you're kind of playing. So here it's not the players that are losing control of themselves, but it's NPCs that are controlling them, that are losing their control, and now the players have to put them down. So it's another way to create tension. It's another way to create, potentially a scariness to it, a scary atmosphere to it. Um, Staring into the abyss and it stares back. Yeah, looking at certain movies I think movies, because they have both visual and sound effects and everything, and you get much more immersed when you have both of those. It's a much harder thing to do in a tabletop role playing game, is to create that level of atmosphere and sound and visual and all of that. It's very, very difficult to duplicate that. But I mean, I bet any one of us would piss our pants if we were in real life on Event Horizon. I mean, it's like, oh, please just kill me off, get me out of here as quickly as damn possible. Um, I don't want to experience what's going to go on in this place. And that, I think, is a harder thing um, to actually duplicate uh, at your table, to get that kind of reaction, because, like I said, it's the visual and the audio that's taking place in a movie that, even the best of us could not produce that same level of immersion at your table. Um, short of, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of audio equipment and all kinds of stuff. But still, um, let's see. We have here. I remember someone once doing this thing where they had a system set up where the players were tasked to defeat the big bad evil. But the longer it takes, the more powerful the bad evil becomes. It levels up too. Yeah. Again, I spoke very early on, Mar Hawkman, about when 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 players fail in their quest, or they fail to do something that was really kind of necessary. I like to attach a negative consequence to that, so that they and they realize it. They actually see the negative impact of it, and that's another form of fear that I'd like the players to actually experience, because I want them to realize that their actions and their inactions will have consequences, both positive consequences, negative consequences, and for those consequences to be meaningful, to be long lasting, and to be visible in the world around them as they continue going forward throughout their adventuring. So if they forget to, or don't bother to engage in a group of hobgoblins, I'm kind of tipping off my player characters. Uh, when you don't do certain things, and those hobgoblins now are going to go off with a whole bunch of equipment that was in the place that they were adventuring in, and they're going to start utilizing that. The players are going to feel responsible for that event, and they might have a building sense of fear about lack of success in their questing career. Um, so, like I said, there's, yes, you have to have depth. You have to have the consequences of failure. You have to have I think, circumstances where players do kind of lose control, at least for a limited amount of time, of their player characters' actions. I certainly wouldn't recommend you go in through the book and say, oh, if there's any charm spells, what, I'm taking all of that stuff out because of player agency. No, the player agency is always there. Um, Even if they lose control, for a limited amount of time of their character, or if they lose control of their character permanently. All right. Well, let's say their character gets maimed and can no longer adventure. Um, yes, your character is still alive. Your character is there. Is now the bartender or something like that. They can return, but their adventuring career is over. Um, I think players would actually be more upset about that than if their character just died. So um, yeah, so that's another that's another thing that needs to that needs to be there in order for players to really have that true sense of nervousness, just being just generally being nervous or scared, or the fear of failure is an important thing to instill upon players as well. I just have to do something really quickly here, um, because the fear of my base and Starfleet command getting sacked is is a fear that I have, and we're currently in a war, and I don't need my base to get sacked. So so real consequences. So there you go. Yes, gotta go, Nugan. Good to see you, and nice meeting you, and thank you for popping in. And yeah, it was a pleasure. Sorry about the initial hiccups. I still don't know what went wrong, why it didn't just roll right into the live stream. It was the first time that I tried to do a pre-planned live stream, and it just didn't click right into it. I had to shut it down and restart it again to do that. So anyway, but thanks for joining. Pleasure meeting you, and next time I do one, I'll certainly try to get that system that where you get early notification. All right, so let's see. Dr. Phobos. Through very descriptive language, voice volume, cadence, inflection, etc., can merge with the player's imagination to put them on edge and scare the crap out of them. Yeah, I guess so. But like I said, it's. I still don't think that it's going to be as immersive as actually, as a movie can create. But yeah, you could certainly, if you're really really good at telling that story and creating that atmosphere verbally, and them having a very crisp and accurate imagination to really understand that going on. I mean, we do it when we read a book, right? You really do immerse yourself when you're reading a book, but when you're reading a book and you're immersed, you're a single person. You can definitely fall into those pages. When you're at the table with so many other distractions and other things going on there, I think that it's a difficult thing to do. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think it's a very very difficult thing to do in order to capture all of those different elements at the same time and have them come in seamlessly without any kind of breaks. That's a tough thing to pull off. But yes, I do agree with you that you can get the players on the edge of their seats. I mean, I can definitely tell you I was on the edge of my seat in Tomb of Horrors with my main character that I really didn't want to lose. And as soon as I saw several other player characters die, I was like, out of there. You know, he wasn't going to be heroic in that case, and so yeah, sometimes the game system does encourage you to run away. That is an important option to always have on the table, is to know when to run. The flight or fight response is an important response to have in your characters, which is one of the reasons why I was never too crazy about morale system. I figured the players will know how to gauge their own level of morale, and they'll know when to run away. And if they're not experienced enough to know when to run away, their characters are going to die. And that's important too. So we're actually coming up on the 2 hour mark, even including the bit of a snafu in the very beginning. But I think we pretty much run the course here of talking about how to create the sense of scariness, for the players, at your table. And I think we touched upon a lot of those various aspects of gaming where we can truly capture that. And and I think it's a combination. You need a game system that obviously has some negative consequences. So a death mechanic is the most common. Um, the next big fear I think that players have is the fear of losing control over their own character, and so that's where games with insanity mechanics are, level up that amount of fear that they might actually experience. um, I certainly introduce in my games the fear of the negative consequences of actions or inactions on the part of the players. So that's important as well. And and then just the other elements of just creating an atmosphere and describing, being descriptive in your explaining what the halls look like, what's the kind of the setting and tone. You might even decide to play some kind of background music or something like that. Just thinking of that, like the sound effects in Daggerfall. Daggerfall was the first Elder Scrolls game I played, and the lightning strikes or the thunder strikes in Daggerfall. The first time I heard it, it literally popped me out of my seat. I fell out of my seat because I had the headset on and all of I was so immersed into it. And then that crack of lightning and that sound of the thunder was just like a total, like a thunderclap, boom, and I was on the floor. Um, that kind of jump scare is hard to reproduce in a tabletop RPG, but you could certainly get it in a computer game. And that's because, again, visual, audio, all, especially through headphones, it's coming, practically directly into your brain, and then you're just responding to those different elements coming in all at the same time, very abruptly. I don't know if you can create jump scares in a tabletop role playing game. But if you think you can, please jump in there on the comment section and put it in there. Hey, check out this particular scenario or whatever to create jump scare, and I will certainly give it a try. So thanks everyone for coming in, and I look forward to seeing you on a gaming screen. If you're out there trick or treating, be safe and double check your candy and everything, because you don't need any scares with with engaging in the public. And I look forward to seeing you on the gaming screen sometime soon. And thanks for popping in. I am going to do this. What can I? You can create jump scares. Yeah. So, Dr. Phobos, please feel free to leave in the comments, how that can be produced. I'd certainly like to try to do it. I just think it's a tough sell, but yeah, I'd certainly like to give it a try. So please leave a comment in there and let me know how, or an example of something that could generate a jump scare. I'd love to see it. So again, thanks for joining everyone, and I'll keep on messing around with this, and hopefully I get a better handle on these live streams, and hopefully I can do a live stream maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever. Uh, Kind of enjoying doing them, and see how it goes. All right. Have a great evening. Take care.